Josh and Frankie with a couple of dumb shits.
Hello, Primates! You found Primus Tracks. Congratulations. Hey, we're at Primus Tracks on Instagram and Threads. PrimusTracksPod@gmail.com is the email address. And there is a Facebook page, aptly titled Primus Tracks, and it is run by the man at the 39th floor of Primus Tracks Towers. The light never turns off up there. It's Frankie Berestein.
Hey, Josh.
How are you as we careen towards the end of Oysterhead's Grand Pecking Order?
I'm nostalgic because this brilliant record is almost over.
It is almost over. Today we are talking about track 11, Pseudo, Suicide. My goodness, you are correct. Achingly close to the end of this record. And of course, as we often do, Frankie, we have business to attend to before we talk about the day's track. Do have a new entrant to the Punch Bowl. If you would like to enter the Punch Bowl, the hallowed halls of the Primus Tracks Punch Bowl, all you have to do is leave a 5-star review at a place like Apple Podcast. If you use a podcast service that doesn't offer a commentary-laden review service, just send us your 5-star review or tag us in your 5-star review on the socials. We're happy to read them right here. This one, Frankie, is a new 5-star review from Apple Podcast. It's titled, Thank You, from Wamola17, parenthetical, Duchess of Raleigh. How often do you think the Duchess of Raleigh spreads her mind?
I'm guessing quite often.
There's no indication in the review, but Duchess of Raleigh, let us know. Just a ballpark figure. How many times a week? The review states, Frankie, thank you guys for all the hard work. Truly a pleasure to listen to. I almost said that like truly a wonder of nature. Truly a pleasure to listen to. Currently binging all episodes. Found you guys at the beginning of November and finishing Desaturating 7 today or tomorrow. My goodness, you are binging. You guys have inspired me to pick my bass back up. I have learned so much about the band and music. Thanks to you and all your guests. And thanks for showing people Les Special. They are quickly becoming a favorite of mine.
Thank you very much for your support.
Yeah.
We truly appreciate all your kind words. And speaking of Les Special, Josh, didn't you just attend the show?
That is the bridge to our miscellaneous debris, Frankie. Well spotted. Les Special, of course, a favorite of ours as well. They just made their run through the great state of Oregon, Frankie, so I got to go up to Bend, Oregon, and spend some time with our pals in Les Special. And they were kind enough, Frankie, to dust off a couple of tunes for me. They played To Defy the Laws of Tradition and Riddles Are Abound Tonight, and they were lovely renditions of those tunes. Great crowd in Bend. Luke Beeman summoned the hippie mosh pit, and the good people of Bend delivered during Les Special's heavier tunes. Great set from Les Special. One note about their performances of To Defy and Riddles, Frankie. We have to shout out Primate Jake, who recently moved to Oregon, attended the show, and brought along his Carl Thompson bass, offering it to Luke to play on stage, and Luke took him up on it. And I had a great time chatting with Jake and his girlfriend, so thank you guys for saying hello. Really cool to meet you. It's really great to meet the primates in the wild, Frankie, whether it's a Primus show, a Les Special show, the furniture store, what have you. You know, Frankie, when you're out at 3 a.m. on your jogs, breaking into cars, I'm sure you meet a primate or two.
That would be cool.
So if you haven't yet, go see Les Special. LesSpecial.net or at Les Special Music on the socials and find their tour dates. They're going to be out on the road a lot here this spring and summer. And once again, thanks to Jake. That was a great time. Frankie,
how was the Carl on Luke's hands, by the way?
Carl sounded great. Luke, of course, was complimentary. He just had this look in his eye, you know? And I said, it was like butter, huh? He said, oh, yeah. So... And it sounded like a Carl Thompson bass. To Carl, then, for creating these instruments that sound like his instruments. It was really cool. Frankie, I think you have some miscellaneous debris.
Yes, Josh, I have 3 pieces of debris.
Oh my gosh, it's raining down upon us.
Yeah. The Residents' 50th anniversary secret show is out now
That's right.
on vinyl and CD. It comes with a professionally recorded video of the show featuring Les on Hello Skinny. Vocals, no bass. This is out via Cherry Red Records. And you can actually check out, I mean, they kindly uploaded the Hello Skinny portion if you want to check out the quality of the show. It's really fantastic.
Residence fans are probably all over that one right now. Good one.
Second piece of debris, Adverse Yaw is out now. A lot of folk have been receiving their box sets, and it looks absolutely fantastic. It looks like a top quality product, Josh, but I couldn't help notice that Fungi and Foe is now credited to the Les Claypool Fancy Band on the spine of the record. Intentional or accidental? What do you think?
Oh, I did not notice that. My Adverse Yaw arrived, opened her up, and was inspecting it fairly closely, but I don't think I looked closely at the spine. So the spine of Fungi says Les Claypool Fancy Band.
Yeah.
Interesting. That must have been intentional.
Are they rewriting history somehow?
Well, the one thing that often gets updated on these reissues is who management is. So if you're looking at an album from before 2003 and it says management Brad Sands, it's a reissue. That's one of your clues.
Yeah.
But interesting that it's now Fancy Band on there.
I mean, Fancy Band had plenty of configurations, right? It was kind of an open door policy, similar to the Frog Brigade.
That's a good catch, Frankie.
Third and final piece of debris, Josh, is that Primus is once again partaking in Record Store Day, this time with a physical release on triple towely blue vinyl of the Red Rocks concert for the 25th anniversary of South Park.
And you scooped us all on that, Frankie. I was looking at the list and I didn't even notice that entry on there. And
it's hard to spot because it's filed under various artists. I think, yeah, that's like way down the bottom.
Frankie, of course, put it on the Primus Tracks Facebook page, to the delight of many. I have to ask you, Frankie, did you do reading up on this? Are they essentially pressing to vinyl what was aired on Comedy Central? Or is it the entire
believe so.
show?
I think Here Come the Bastards and Butters the Cat are in there. The Mollusk is in there. Several of the tracks they did with Trey and Matt. Of course, Closer to the Heart is also there. I did look for some of the other titles, but I believe, considering the capacity of vinyl in terms of running time, I think it's a streaming version. I don't believe it's the full show.
Okay, so it's heavily edited and curated then for a vinyl release, which is not a bad thing. But I'm sure we'll all really much. I'll say that again. I'm sure we'll all enjoy the audio quality of that vinyl release. Record Store Day, of course, sometime in April. I don't even remember what day it is. Frankie knows. He'll be in line for his copy.
I'm sure it's going to be a fabulous product.
That brings us to today's track, Pseudo Suicide, track 11 from the Grand Pecking Order by a little band called Oysterhead. This one, Frankie, checks in at 4 minutes and 54 seconds. Music credited to Oysterhead, lyrics, Trey and Les. We actually got, this is one of, what was it, 4 tracks that made it to the record from the initial performance?
Yeah, this is another of the fully formed tracks that they premiered in New Orleans.
As we have throughout the record, Frankie, when we are exposed to a track that was performed at the initial one-off or intended to be one-off performance in May of 2000 in New Orleans, we sample the track before you even get to your essay. So, let's hear some bits and pieces of the first ever performance of Pseudo Suicide. And I'm going to warn you guys right now, it is 16 minutes long. We're not going to hear the whole thing, don't worry. But let's hear what it sounded like in its primordial ooze. A bit looser than what you hear on the record, huh, Frankie?
Yeah.
But it's there. The idea is there. So they had that heavy idea right off the bat. That's interesting. I'm going to move ahead to a time code in which you labeled drums. This is so different.
They were still experimenting, right? They were still trying things out.
Yeah, they had the rough idea there, and they were playing around with what they had. Stu's doing some good stuff there, really letting it rip. Especially for a guy who hadn't performed on a drum kit in a long time. Moving ahead to a sample of Trey's guitar work. And for those of you listening along at home to your recording of Oysterhead, New Orleans in the year 2000, this is 3 minutes, 20 seconds. They're still figuring it out, but it's you know what I really like about that is the recording's so clean. I was mostly listening to Les and Stu. That's funny. It could just be that the guitar is buried on the way I'm listening to it right now. All right, you have the magic words at the 12-minute mark, so we have to play it. And of course, those magic words are jam vehicle. Oh yeah, they're gonna jam it out. Yeah. So some of what we've heard so far, Frankie, I would classify in the category of train wreck. And that's not my terminology. That's Stuart's, remember. That part, not train wrecky. That was fun.
I'm guessing that's what you labeled jam vehicle type 2, right?
They went outside of the structure?
Yeah, completely deviated from the original track, right?
Yeah, that is a different type of jam vehicle. You're absolutely right. You need a commercial's driver's license for one of those. You need to be a pro. And then I'm very curious about your next time code, Frankie. We're going to 14 minutes and 45 seconds. First of all, what a short trip through a 16-minute track. But you labeled it with just the words "buy it."
Oh, that's Riva. Yeah. Buy it.
That's what that means. Well, let's hear it. I was completely befuddled, and now I understand.
Bag it, tag it, sell it to the butcher in the market. Bag it, tag it, sell it to the butcher in the market. Bag it, tag it, sell it to the butcher in the market. Bag it, tag it, sell it to the butcher in the market. Bag it, tag it, sell it to the butcher in the market. Bag it, tag it, sell it to the butcher in the market. Bag it, tag it, sell it to the butcher in the market. Bag it, tag it, sell it to the butcher in the market. Bag it, tag it, sell it to the butcher in the market. Bag it, tag it, sell it to the butcher in the market. Bag it, tag it, sell it to the butcher in the market. Bag it, tag it. Pseudo suicide.
So that's bag it, tag it, sell it to the butcher in the market, which I believe is also a deviation of the original lyric, which I believe is sell it to the butcher at the store, right?
Oh, you would know better than I, sir. I don't know.
Oh, yes. I've heard that track a couple of times. I'm sure our fish resident at Patreon will be able to confirm this.
Yes, we're getting all kinds of people yelling at us right now, telling us what the correct lyric is. Thank you all for your help. All right, let's close this initial performance out. It's funny that Les snuck that in there. I love the arising intensity of his voice through each repetition.
Sell it to the butcher in the store is the original lyric as performed in the Lawn Boy album from 1990.
Well, as you know, market is a much more fun word to say than store.
Much, much more. It flows a lot better.
Absolutely. I would say roughly 26% more fun to say.
Yeah. I'm glad Les took that artistic liberty.
Or just forgot what the word was and substituted market. It's my guess. That's how he remembered it. All right, let's hear the last 30 seconds of 16-minute version of Suicide, the first ever performance.
Two observations, Josh.
Yep.
First of all, turning Pseudo Suicide into Pseudo Berry Pie is absolutely brilliant. And once again, like we discussed when we were talking about Little Faces, it's such a shame that outro was never used on the record because it is brutal. It would have been such a compelling conclusion to this track on the record.
And that's the first lick they play in unison at this performance for a track called I Am Oysterhead, correct?
Yeah.
When they first take the stage, yeah. So they bookended the performance with that lick, which is a great idea. And it is. It's a cool lick. And it didn't make it to the record. Him screaming Pseudo Berry Pie was pretty funny, I gotta say.
Yeah. What could be a Pseudo Berry Pie?
Here's what it probably was, Frank. It was just an inside joke. One of them said pseudo suicide, and the other guy didn't quite hear it. What'd you say? Pseudo berry pie? And boom. A joke was born.
Sounds completely reasonable.
Well, thank you for sharing that track, Frankie. It is fun to hear the proto Oysterhead, as we've been calling it. So, with that in mind, having heard this first version, what else do we know about the track?
All right, Josh. Pseudo Suicide was premiered in New Orleans, as we just heard, and then the skeleton was finalized at the studio, and then it was performed as per record version throughout all the Oysterhead shows to date. So this is one of the live show staples. It's been performed at festivals, it's been performed at solo dates, it's been everywhere. Sometimes it gets jammed out a lot more than the studio track. Sometimes they leave it for the end, and I guess because of time constraints, they don't jam it out so much, but it's always different for sure. And it's such a great track live, I must say. Well, in terms of the studio version, it's definitely one of my favorites on the record. I'll tell you the reason why later, but live, it's just an incredible song because of all the energy that it's got.
It is that energy that draws me to the track. It is upbeat. There's an edge. There's an element of heaviness to it, but it moves. It's quite spirited. And all those things really speak to me. And this probably is my top track from the record. Although we still have two left. And I'm listening to these one at a time as we make our way through the record. So the last two tracks of the record, Frankie, I haven't heard in years. But
wow.
Yeah, going back through each of these tracks one at a time as we work our way through this disc, I think Pseudo Suicide stands out again, much as it did 20-odd years ago when I first picked it up.
I'm eager to discuss the lyrics, Josh, because they have quite a few interesting references thrown in there. Some a little more obscure than others, but what do you say if we go over them now?
Sure, let's start with lyrics. And I actually wanted to start with the title itself, Frankie. As far as the title goes, do you know the clinical term pseudo-suicide? Are you familiar with its definition?
So it says the faking of one's own death by suicide is sometimes referred to as pseudo-suicide. People who commit pseudo-suicide, pseudocide, can do so by leaving evidence, clues, or through other methods. Death hoaxes can also be created and spread solely by third parties for various purposes.
So that's one definition of it. Through a bit of reading on my own, Frankie, I found pseudo-suicide is also a term that may have been borrowed for this tune from the study of sleep disorders.
Yeah, it says parasomnia, pseudo-suicide.
That's the one, yeah. So there are people who have sleep disorders in which they may carry out violent actions or simply sleepwalk, and they are not consciously in control of their bodies. They're in some kind of state between unconsciousness or sleep and wakefulness, but they're not consciously in control of their own faculties.
That is fascinating.
And there are some cases of people who in that state have killed themselves or essentially committed suicide. Through pathology and study of these people and their circumstances, medical professionals have said, concluded, I should say, that some of these people did not consciously kill themselves, that they did it in that strange space between sleepfulness and wakefulness, and that is called a pseudo-suicide because they didn't necessarily willingly kill themselves. That is a fascinating topic, and obviously it's a tragic conclusion for the individual, but it just raises for me all kinds of questions about how our brains work for one, but how much are we actually in control of ourselves and our bodies?
Now that you described that sleep disorder, I just realized where Rod Serling found inspiration for one of the classic Night Gallery episodes, The Last Laurel, which depicts a man that has mastered the ability to leave his body while he's sleeping, and he can actually carry objects and do all kinds of things. And during one of those astral projection episodes, he's attempting to murder his wife, but he somehow goes back into his own room by mistake, and he ends up killing himself.
If that's not a Rod Serling story, I don't know what is. The quintessential Rod Serling story right there. Yeah, so that idea of pseudo-suicide, then, it can take many forms. A false, someone who fakes their own death. The curious case of someone who might actually off themselves when they're not fully awake. And of course, pseudo comes from the Greek word for false. For those of you who remember your middle school vocabulary lessons about Greek and Latin roots and affixes. Everything just around the title is of interest to me. And we haven't even talked about the lyrics yet. But
yeah,
have at it, Frankie. What do you see in these lyrics?
The portions that are the most interesting for me in particular. Knew a man who went to jail. His mama couldn't raise his bail, found him dangling in his cell. This is not the first time that Les has used that imagery, right? I
Yeah.
mean, we know that the main character in Bob was not in jail, but it's exactly the same image that Les is using once again. You all remember Danny most. Do you think, Josh, that by any chance Les could be talking about Danny Gatton? Daniel Wood Gatton Jr., September 4, 1945, October 4, 1994, was an American virtuoso guitarist who combined blues, rockabilly, jazz, and country to create a musical style he called redneck jazz. On October 4, 1994, Gatton locked himself in the garage on his farm in Maryland and committed suicide by gunshot. Although he left no notes or explanation, family members and close friends believe he had struggled with depression for many years prior.
Plausible connection.
Gatton has been described as possessing an extraordinary proficiency on his instrument.
Certainly could be. I can't place any other Dannys.
Oh, look, among his admirers are Buckethead, James Burton, Evan Johns, Albert Lee, Roy Buchanan, Slash,
Oh, wow.
Steve Vai, and our very own Trey Anastasio. So this has got to be the guy, right?
I think the dots are now fully connected. As soon as you said Buckethead, I was in. I was convinced. All right, so we've identified most likely Danny, because that was a standing mystery for me all these years. Wasn't sure who Danny was.
I really can't remember when it didn't flow right from the pen. That's a fascinating, I think it's a fascinating insight into Les Claypool's creative process, because a lot of artists do struggle with writer's block, right?
Yeah.
And Les, on the other hand, has said that fishing is the only way he can actually turn his mind off from thinking about lyrics, songs, and music. So he has a gift, right? He doesn't have to struggle with finding inspiration. It's always there. It just comes naturally. But at the same time, he's not apprehensive about it, because he follows that couplet with, "When it don't, I'll carpenter again." So his life would not be over if he cannot write songs anymore, because he's got all these other skills and talents that he can turn to, right?
Right. And I'm glad you brought up that passage, or any of these passages. One, for the structure. So it's the first go round is AAA as far as rhyme scheme, right? AAA, and then because there ain't no cure for suicide. BBB rhyme scheme, there ain't no cure for suicide. CCC, and so on. It's really cool, that repetition of the rhyme sound for the first three lines, and then there ain't no cure for suicide. That very stanza, I wanted to point out too, because he's of course dropping in some autobiographical information necessarily, because he goes from literal suicide, with the guy dangling in a cell and the chemicals, to his own life. And I'm guessing this is more figurative. He's not actually having suicidal thoughts because he can't successfully write a song anymore. I think what he's getting at is career suicide, because he talked about, and he's been very candid about the fallout after the antipop cycle, which was, that's the closest we ever came to shit in the bed, and essentially committing career suicide by not being ourselves.
Exactly.
So he's figuratively talking about there ain't no cure for suicide. So if it's not working on an artistic level, I'll just drop it and go do something else. And that's a really great stanza to consider in the first person there. It's pretty cool. Well, and then the one that follows it, once upon a greasy day. For years, I thought it was Crazy Day, but it's Greasy Day. And because it's Les Claypool, you have to say greasy. Oh, Greasy D. You can't say greasy. It's not, it just doesn't work. It doesn't flow. Once upon a greasy day, I had an opportune to play, flanked by old Stu and Trey. So there's meta commentary there. Singing about, and he's done that before, like in Fish On, of course, where he references Larry and Todd Huth and so on. And, in Is It Luck, he says, well, Herb, and well, Lur, but here he's talking about old Stu and Trey, the guys he's playing with in this band. And he did it because there ain't no cure for suicide in the career sense. Got to go do it.
And it is something that he referenced frequently during the New Orleans show. He emphasized during some points of the show that he was completely baffled, right? That he was sharing the stage with Stuart Copeland.
Yeah, that was a watershed moment for him. So you got to go out and do it. You can't quit before you do that.
Now, this is where I think it gets really... I think so far we have a pretty good handle on the lyrics, but the coda after the awesome guitar part, I think it's where it gets really mysterious. 7 seconds after I dissolve into the fiery gates of hell. Why 7 seconds?
I have no idea. And this is where I think we're getting into, because Trey's singing it, I think these are Trey lyrics. Yeah. And
so here we're in Trey territory, right? Everything is kind of an inside thing. Locked up in a plastic tube where Sanzio lay frozen when he fell. Of course, that's Brad Sands, right?
That's Sanzio, Brad Sands.
So there must be some kind of inside anecdote we're not privy to involving Brad Sands and a plastic tube.
Right. I highly doubt he's going to call in and tell us what's going on there. But it's really funny because it's, as you referenced, Sanzio lay frozen when he fell. And then we get an iteration of Pseudo suicide, and then we get he awoke to find. So is this still Sanzio? He awoke to find that he was tumbling
like the Bills of Buffalo. Is that? Yeah. I mean, is he just switching up the Buffalo Bills name? Is he talking about the football team?
Yes, and this is where I take umbrage because I'm a lifelong Buffalo Bills fan. And so he is using the word tumbling, and yes, the Bills have tumbled many a time. They've never won a Super Bowl. They went 4 times in a row in the 90s and lost each time. They've had so many heartbreaking losses, but the comparison, woke up to find that he was tumbling like the Bills of Buffalo, tells me Sanzio, or whoever this might be, was in a state of sleepwalking, but then woke up because he was comically tumbling down a hill or something. But the comparison to the Buffalo Bills always hurt my feelings. It does bring to mind, though, the clinical term pseudo-suicide for somebody to wake up to find themselves falling over themselves. What a strange thing. Now, I'm not a sleepwalker. I never have been. And given what I read about up to this point, I'm thankful.
So now that you mentioned that, now that you put it in that particular way, 7 seconds after I dissolve into the fiery gates of hell could just be a dream, right? The narrator was sleepwalking, and that was kind of a nightmare in his mind, locked up in a plastic tube where Sanzio lay frozen when he fell. So it's like he's following the footsteps of Sanzio, right? It's like they're going through the same experience, but it's all in his mind. And then when he wakes up, he's, as you said, he's probably tumbling down a hill or something like that.
Sanzio, I hope you have this under control, man. We like you, buddy. We wish you peace and long life. I suppose that's a good way to interpret it, Frankie, because I'm somewhat at a loss because these lyrics are a bit more esoteric than what Les provides earlier in the tune. I mean, it's the first stanza: gasoline, Vaseline, benzene, amphetamine, all the chemicals in between. There ain't no cure for suicide. Pretty clear what the message is there. Right? She was a dainty thing. He held her with a diamond ring. She never did have that final fling because there ain't no cure for suicide. Yep. Now, the one that we glossed over it, but the one I really enjoy from Les's portion of things is bitchin' here, bitchin' there, bitchin' damn near everywhere. It's just fun to say.
I found an error in my logic, Josh.
Okay.
7 seconds after I dissolve. So that's from the first person perspective, right?
Yep.
In a plastic tube where Sanzio lay frozen when he fell.
Yep.
He awoke. So Sanzio awoke. He's talking about a third person, but he's not talking about himself. So he might still be asleep, right?
Oh, what if Sanzio had a dream that Trey went to hell?
It's such a complex portion of the song. Actually, it's hard to figure out.
It's fun to speculate on, unless you're a Bills fan.
And what and what do you think about Palith in a backwards way of living? So it says, keeping the end in mind shapes how we live our lives in the here and now. Living life
Wow.
backwards means taking the one thing in our future that is certain, for instance, death, and letting that inform our journey before we even get there. Does that sound reasonable to you?
Wow. Where are you drawing that from? That's some interesting text.
A psychiatric blog.
Oh, very good. I wasn't thinking I'd be doing such intense self-examination today. And it's a bit much. I suppose so. If you backwards living is recognizing the ultimate fate that one will experience and living with that in mind, I suppose. Palette in a backwards way of living. Huh.
It also the other theory is living life backwards means that when we are young, our eyes are always directed toward the future and its opportunities, and
Okay.
when we are old, we are just reflecting on the past over and over.
Yeah.
It makes sense, right? We're never on a straight line, so we're living life backwards because in the present or when we're young, we're thinking about the future, and when we get to the future, we start thinking about the past.
And I suppose that's the quickest way to go, because the worst thing you can do is to stop discovering new things and expanding your mind and your horizons, putting on those blinders and just focusing on the past. In a practical sense, that can lead to quick mental and cognitive decline in old age. So maybe there's something
And
to that.
artistically speaking, it would also be kind of a career or an artistic suicide because
Yeah.
you're just living from your former glories and you're not doing anything new, right?
Just to further that, and I don't know how deep these lyrics go with these guys, but to further that idea, Les Claypool has said over and over and over again, I don't do things to be nostalgic. I do, like I play these Primus tunes because I love them. We don't tour these albums because it's nostalgic. And nostalgic is a dangerous trap for a lot of people. So from an artistic point of view, living on those past glories, can be dangerous because you're not pushing yourself possibly beyond.
Fascinating
that.
lyrics, actually.
Yeah, very much so. And it all stems from that idea of pseudo-suicide. These guys aren't actually talking about offing themselves, of course, but it's artistically or career-wise, I guess is some of the subtext.
And it
Yeah.
matches perfectly with how Les has described that these different bands and projects reinvigorated him artistically and emotionally, right? And creatively, because prior to Frog Brigade and Oysterhead, he had hit a roadblock, creatively speaking, right?
Yeah, and if we go back to that stanza, Greasy Day, opportune. I love opportune to play, by the way. It should be opportunity, but it's a Claypoolism, so I had the opportune to play because he had to fit the word in. But yeah, I had flanked by old Stu and Trey because there ain't no cure for suicide. So going back to artistic suicide, this is May 2000. This is right after Primus goes on hiatus. So I had to do this because I was killing my own career. Kind of cool to get that insight. These are some of the more fetching lyrics on the record for myself. And then, of course, it's paired with this music, which really moves. And I'm seeing why I really, really like this tune.
And from the musical perspective, Josh, I think it works really great because it builds and it builds and it builds, and then it delivers in spades with the release or the reward, which is the guitar solo portion where the tempo completely changes.
Yep.
It could be basically the second chapter of the song where lyrically, I mean, we just noticed how obscure it gets, but musically speaking, it becomes incredibly compelling, right?
So you're saying they wield the spade for this portion of the tune.
Totally.
Sorry.
Because I mean we're kind of accustomed in popular music to verses building up to something and then choruses being the release, right? The
Right.
catchy portion. And here there's quite a bit of build up. The chorus is actually pretty understated if you compare it to the coda. So that's where the song really reveals its true nature, right?
With the exception of Trey doing my favorite Trey thing, which is the yelling chorus. So Les
Yeah.
gives us Pseudo suicide. I love the yell. My favorite thing, the Trey yell. Yeah, so it does build in a different way. Let's sample some of these parts. So we heard the initial performance, and let's see how it became refined into the pseudo suicide we all know and love.
Bam!
Envelope filter.
The drums are absolutely amazing, and I love how the song just attacks you right off the gate.
Yes.
It's just in your face.
Stu is really giving it to us. That double time is really great, and then underneath, and I would say that's almost a Sabbath-like riff that they're doing
it
after the
is.
double time part. It's very Sabbathy to me. Les is letting that envelope filter. I don't know. Is that one of his MIDI pedals, or is that the envelope filter?
It sounds like the envelope filter to me.
I think that's what it is. So he's letting that ride. Trey's doing a really cool Sabbath sounding riff, and Stu is just pounding away and making some really great
Incredible.
noise.
Yeah. Incredible musicianship throughout.
Yeah, and so this is the track where they kind of put it out there and show off a little bit, because up to this point there's been very little showcasing of themselves. They've mostly just been enjoying each other, but I think this was one where they kicked it up a notch just to give us a little taste. Right away, I'm engaged. And then the vocal delivery through the verses are great. Les is way up there in his nose again.
No kill for suicide. No man, he went to jail. His mama couldn't raise his bail. Found him dangling in his cell. There ain't no kill for suicide. She was quite a daisy thing.
So the pattern that is throughout these stanzas is funny to me, and I've over-exaggerated it throughout the years when I sing this little tune to myself, Frankie. I start way up here. Knew a man, he went to jail. His mama couldn't raise his bail. Found him dangling in his cell. Because there ain't no cure for suicide. And he kind of does that. I'm over-exaggerating because I always end up down here. There ain't no cure for suicide. But yeah. But he starts way up there. Knew a man, he went to jail. And then he's bringing it down in register, which is kind of cool. So it kind of echoes the riff that da-na-na-na-na-na-na that comes down like that. So it kind of echoes that to me. You've got a time code of 2 minutes, 20 seconds on the studio track.
So that's my favorite part. That's the reason I love the song. Just what Trey does with the guitar for the release after the build-up. It's so catchy. Musically speaking, it's so memorable. I don't know what effect he's using. I don't know if multiple guitars were layered in the recording, but it just sounds so great.
There ain't no cure for suicide. There ain't no cure for suicide.
Oh, yeah. I think we're freaking Buckethead out a little bit there.
Yeah. Do you think there are some overdubs there.
There's 2 or 3 guitars there for sure. Yeah. One in each. There's at least one in each channel. And
I love when they do that, when they just pound your ears with guitars at the same time. It's incredible.
Yeah, once again, they're letting us have it. Stu's doing some really cool drum stuff underneath, and Les is just giving us. I'm not saying it's a simplistic line, but it's not an overly complicated line, and he's just riding it out and giving Trey the space to have at it. And
Les is just serving the track. Yes,
serving the track. Yeah, everybody gets a chance to do some wild ass stuff on this track. And then the vocal layering there again, there's the Sandman mic, there's the regular mic, and there's different registers for the "There Ain't No Cure for Suicide" part. And then of course the release when he yells it. Gosh, really fun stuff. And then just the repetition of Pseudo Suicide at the in the last minute or so with the Trey yells is quite pleasing to the ear. I'm going to forward to your last time code, Frankie, the 4-minute mark for more guitar. Let's just let the whole last minute play. Why not? Big rock and roll ending, too.
And quite melodic. The guitar is quite virtuose, but it's not noodling. It's actually got a pretty great melody in there.
He's playing some fiery stuff, and Les is doing that bam, 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 which is it's so cool. It, like, in isolation, it might sound like some kind of down-home jig, but it's a big rock lick, actually.
And I love that part because Les and Trey are yelling out Pseudo Suicide, but in my mind, I'm singing Pseudo Berry Pie along with them.
Pseudo Berry Pie! Just as fun to yell. I don't know if you noticed, but right before they went into that part of the repetition of Pseudo Suicide with the vocals, there was a bass call down.
Yes, there was.
I wish we had a running list of all the studio tracks of the bass call down. It would be pretty
There's one in Riddles.
Oh, yeah. It'd be pretty extensive at this point. It's a signature move. And it's fun. I look forward to it.
I've heard lots of people also compare this track to Chili Peppers, but I wouldn't know about that because I've never heard any of their records.
I don't know where I would draw the Chili Peppers comparison. Now, I know them casually, so I can't really speak to it either. But if you have any Chili Peppers insights regarding Pseudo Suicide, hit us up at Primus Tracks, primustrackspod@gmail.com. It's time, Frankie, for Primate's Takes. If you would like your thoughts on the track at hand read on this very podcast, all you have to do is go to patreon.com/Primus Tracks. The universal constant there is that I will post a thread about the track up for discussion. You put your thoughts there. I'll read them here. Frankie Johnny Perona, the same Johnny Perona, whose theme song is playing right now, says, I wish the entire album sounded like Pseudo. In my opinion, this track brings out the absolute best in Trey, Les, and Stu. Trey especially rips on this one. It definitely feels the most like a Primus song, though I can't imagine Primus doing it. Stu's fills during the main riff breakdowns, oh yeah. Les being Les and Trey letting her rip make this a 10 out of 10 for me. The trio at its finest.
I find myself in complete agreement with that review.
I think that is probably the one that got the most love. Yeah, absolutely. Jordan Kahn, our resident fish expert, says, Trey is a Jedi, and Pseudo Suicide has some of his finest technical shredding. Right up there with Maze and Llama. I assume those are fish songs or Trey Anastasio songs that I'm not familiar with. Eric in Australia, says, Pseudo is my favorite album track. A punk speed intro, almost doom, simple section driven by Les's rap and... I wouldn't call that rap. That's me editorializing. And Stu's fills, and then a glorious galloping back half. The pearl in the oyster. And that is the best description of Pseudo Suicide that I've heard. The pearl in the oyster. He called it an almost doom simple section, and that's what Sabbath is. It's like proto-doom. So I think Eric and I are on the same wavelength there. Brooks Delight says, this one feels like they just smashed two songs together and decided, hey, it works. And it does work.
Exactly.
It does work. Yeah, the track
I've
is a real
always thought
highlight.
that too.
Brooks says, the track is a real highlight, feels like a true collaboration with all three bandmates knocking it out of the park. Anthony Del Preet says, Pseudo was never a favorite of mine, but has grown on me with a cool, heavy riff, and the second half of the song is pretty cool with Trey vocals. Oh yeah, except the part where he says tumbling like the Bills of Buffalo. Sad. Anthony and I, both Bills fans. Edwin Allen Richards IV, Frankie, our landed gentry, says, Pseudo is a banger. It is the perfect shining example of the powerhouse that Oysterhead is when all three members are firing on all cylinders. 10 out of 10 would recommend to any newbie. Trish provided a short clip from Stuart Copeland's YouTube channel when he excitedly talks about Pseudo Suicide being his favorite Oysterhead song.
Awesome.
She quotes Stu as saying it's a feedback loop of coolness. There you go.
No wonder they play it every time they get together.
Hey, if Stu wants to play it, they're going to play it.
He loves the song so much. He was playing it during the wrong song in New Orleans as well.
Oh. Thank you, Trish, for that quote from Stu. That's great insight. And thank you all, primates, for your takes on Pseudo Suicide. Sounds like Frankie, it's a favorite.
Quite deservedly.
Let's hear a couple of live cuts, and you'll never guess where they're from.
We're going to Dunder Mifflin, right?
Pseudo Suicide in Scranton. Oh, yeah. That was a cool Les fill. Ooh, yeah. You know, at that tempo, it sounds much less Sabbathy and more... we just want to blow the audience's head off. Oh, man, there's something really satisfying about some of those Stuart Copeland rolls on that snare, because it's just him. It sounds so good. I can see why they play it every night, and Stu counting it in, he really wanted to go for it. All right, we're going to forward to the bridge. That's right. I forgot on the live versions he hits that power chord while he's doing that every once in a while. You'll notice I stopped it right before my least favorite lyric in the song, Frankie. By the way, this is 4 minutes, 54 seconds, almost exactly how long it is on the record, but the tempo is... Yeah,
I guess they were pressured by the curfew.
And they had to whip through it, but clearly at that tempo... and fitting it in 4:54, they made some extra space for themselves. Let's hear that outro. finish. Next one, Frankie, going back to Atlanta.
Sweetwater.
May 1, 2022.
For suicide. Knew a man, he went to jail. His mama couldn't raise his bail. They found him dangling in the cell because her ex killed for suicide. She was quite a dainty thing. He held her with a diamond ring. Never did have that violin because her ain't no cure for suicide. Bitchin' here, bitchin' there, bitchin' damn near everywhere. Flippin' up for the chin in there. Ain't no cure for suicide.
We didn't talk about that part right after bitchin' damn near everywhere. Sandman mic on full display there, and Trey with some guitar embellishments during those verses. That's nice. Let's hear some more guitar at the 2-minute mark in Atlanta. Oh yeah, let's hear the outro to this one. Are we going to get another big rock ending, do you think, Frankie, or do you think the wheels will fall off and it'll be a disaster?
I think it's going to be incredibly climatic. Neat.
Well, I can say this, Frankie. Wake up, pseudo-suicide. You've been tracked. Next time, we will critique the social hierarchy.
In the Grand Pecking Order.
Pseudo-suicide, man. What a pleasure. What a treat. What a great tune. It probably is the biggest standout from the record for myself, and a tune that has stayed in my head for 20-odd years. Final thoughts on this one, Frankie?
One of my favorites on the record. I like it as much as Mr. Oysterhead. Incredible musicianship, fantastic guitar work by Trey. I just discovered how deep the lyrics are because of this episode, and a song that never disappoints in a live setting. So that's signature Oysterhead right there.
Thank you, patrons. Thank you, primates. Thank you, listeners. Later days.
Willie Mays.
Pseudo.